Hello, and welcome to Handled Ish Productivity for the Imperfect, a weekly podcast for people who want to elevate their productivity but are not looking for perfection. I'm your host, Betsy Hayes, and I'm so happy you're here with us in podcast land and on YouTube. And if you are watching us on YouTube, you are already aware that I have a guest this morning. And I'm so excited to have my friend and author, Alyssa Jarrett here. Alyssa's actually going to be with us for 2 weeks, which is really exciting. There's a lot to talk about. She's got a lot of fun things going on. And this particular episode is particularly timely because we're going to first start talking about her life as an author of spicy romance novels, which is so much fun, right? First of all, just off the bat, to know someone who is a romance author. And this is a very special week. So why don't we just start with that? Why is this, and this episode will air on May 21st, 2024. So first of all, Alyssa, why is this a special week? We'll just get rolling.
Yeah, well, and thanks again for having me. I'm just overjoyed to be here because May 21st is going to be a pretty important date for me, for the rest of my life. It's the day I officially become an author. My debut, Love Actually, releases, and it's been a roller coaster ride getting to this point. So I'm really excited to talk about it. And yeah, we got a lot of stuff planned, but yeah, tomorrow is the day.
Yay! So, yes, this will be Alyssa's debut romance novel, the first of many, because I know she already has lots and lots of plans for subsequent books. So let's talk about, being an author, first of all, sort of what inspired you to do that, and then how do folks have time to write or to paint or to sculpt or to
Yeah.
cook or bake or whatever their creative expression is, because I think we'll obviously talk specifically about writing today, but I think the things that you're going to share are going to be really helpful for a lot of folks, regardless of what their creative expression is. So how did you get into this romance novel stuff?
Yeah, it's so funny. I think when it comes to our passions, we always look back on our life in hindsight and say, well, that makes a whole lot of sense, right? So I think I've been in love with love for a really long time. My some of my first early memories were when my mom would get her nails done. She would go to an esthetician's house, and there would be soap operas playing on the TV in the background. And so I'd be sitting there amusing myself, watching The Bold and the Beautiful, and just getting kind of caught up in the love triangles and the relationship drama. And then that just kind of escalated as I grew older to, reading her Cosmo and Redbook magazines for the sex tips, and just being in love with early aughts rom-coms. And so by the time I got into high school, college, and I started reading the romance genre more regularly, that was at the point where I thought, man, I would just be so over the moon if I could do something like this, especially in such a genre that brings so many people joy. And so now looking back on it, I'm like, you know what? This is something that I feel so fulfilled and rewarded by, and I can't imagine doing anything else. So yeah, I can talk about romance probably literally all day.
Yay! Oh, I love it. I love it. So yes, being passionate, of course, is really important. And I love that you said, looking back, it feels so obvious, right? That you are in this space right now writing romance novels. And I think that's really fun for a lot of us to sort of reflect, like, well, how did I get here? Oh yeah, I've always been going to here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So first of all, listeners, I think that's kind of a fun thing to think about if you are wondering if there is a creative pursuit that perhaps you might want to spend more time on. Maybe take a look at some of the things that feel like your story would or excuse me, that would be obvious in your story when it comes to this. So that's fun. So
Yeah.
how when you started doing this.
Mhm.
You were working full time in a pretty intense job, and so how? I guess maybe the first thing is, how do you find time, to be a writer?
Mhm.
And we'll obviously talk about some of the productivity and writing stuff. But first
Yeah.
of all, where do you find the time to do this?
Well, I'm gonna say that it was definitely a very long journey. I rarely hear of someone who's actually an overnight success. Like they just decided to write one day and then boom, New York Times bestseller list, right? That doesn't normally happen. So I got started about a decade ago, just writing more regularly. And so about 2014, it was November. And for a lot of writers that may be listening to this, November is National Novel Writing Month, also known as NaNoWriMo. And it's a really great opportunity to start building a routine into writing because it's a challenge where you dedicate to write 50,000 words in 30 days. Now, this no one's grading you, no one's giving you a report at the end of this. It's all self-reported. So if you wanted to write blah 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 for 50,000 times and turn it in, it would count. And I've never won one. But it was a way for me to establish a routine and get in the rhythm of making this part of my day. And I don't necessarily write every single day. I think that's sort of archaic and misguided advice. But it got me into a rhythm. And so the harder part then is when you're not on a challenge, you don't necessarily have something keeping you accountable and you don't have a publisher yet. So you're not on deadline and it's all, based on your desires, your passions, and the things that you'd like to pursue. So and this is something that I hear a lot with early writers is that the first book just takes way too long, absolutely outrageously long, because you have no idea what you're doing. And so that novel, the first novel that I started writing in 2014, I would say like if I was to compress the time, it probably took me 3 years to draft, but that was over the course of 6 years because I took hiatuses, I was climbing the corporate ladder in the tech industry, I got married and I couldn't plan a wedding and write a book at the same time. And so life happens. I totally get that. Um, so it wasn't until about 2020 when I just kind of threw my hands up in the air and I said, um, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do anymore. I've been tinkering around on this thing. I don't know what I don't know. I need professional help. And so that's when I reached out to my now editor, Kristen at the Blue Garret. Um, and I have to laugh because obviously 2020 like rocked everybody to their core, and I'm not the only one who woke up and got a fire under their butt and was like, I'm writing a book now. Like I think everybody and their mother, it felt like was gonna be doing that. But it was great because I felt like I finally like willpower and diligence kind of met and I was like, you know what, like I'm done like just spiraling and spinning my wheels, like let's get some outside help and let's do this.
Oh, I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. So what are some of your tips for folks who do want to establish a writing routine or some sort of creative routine? Because it's very easy to say, butt in chair, right? Um,
Yeah.
or
Yep.
uh, but getting that to happen, and then also being able to actually, do something is obviously a whole nother story. So what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Well, I think when we think about the locus of control, there you have to start with individual behaviors, and then you need to also look at structural or systemic issues that may be keeping you from, accomplishing whatever you want to accomplish. And so, like the first, like when we think about individual behaviors, a lot of people talk about motivation, inspiration, and like lightning's gonna strike, and everything, and then all of a sudden it's just going to furiously come at you like magic. And some days are like that, and sometimes I have a shower moment and I'm like, absolutely, let's get this on paper, right? So some of it's not going to be sexy. You're going to probably hate, whatever you put on paper. But you got to get it down before you can get it right. And so there were a variety of things that helped me, like little quirky tricks that, turned off my perfectionist brain while I was drafting. I would say like a couple a couple key ones that kind of pop out to me. Number one, like pick a really goofy font. Like I would never use Comic Sans professionally, but for some reason, when I draft in Comic Sans, it all just seems like silliness, and then it gives me permission to not take it so seriously. So just kind of like a weird thing, give that a shot maybe on your like next writing session, and see if it like, if you get out of Times New Roman, like does it lighten you up and be like, all right, it doesn't matter, like this is just going to be fine, we're just going to play around today. So that was been really good. And then for me personally, as someone who's a perfectionist, I think you can get sucked into editing while you go, and sometimes that works for people and sometimes that's really helpful. I think for a majority of writers that's probably a hindrance. And so usually I would set like a writing sprint. I'd say like, okay, I'm going to do 25 minutes on with like a 5-minute break. And so I would try to say like, I'm going to write as much as I can in this 25 minutes, but I'm not going to edit, right? We're not going back, we're not fixing typos. And we're putting the internet away. If I don't know the answer to something, I'll just write myself a note and say like, note, figure out restaurant name here, or note what kind of car does she drive, and then move on, right? Because then that will be your editing self's problem, and you can figure that out later. But right now your main concern is like you just have to tell the story to yourself to understand what the structure is going to look like, what the plot's going to look like. And then once you have the scaffolding up, then you can figure out how to decorate, right? Like you have to like house metaphors obviously are super common for us. Like you just have to lay the foundation one step at a time, and then you can make it pretty. Then you can fall in love with your sentences. Don't get too caught up on any one particular thing you're putting down on paper or you're typing up, because your final draft is going to look so much drastically different from your first draft that we just need to get the first draft out.
Yeah. Oh, the font. Oh my gosh. The font suggestion is something I have never thought of, which is so ironic because, you and I have known each other for a long time. You probably know I love fonts, and I talk about them way too much in the classroom. And
Yep.
I absolutely love that idea so much because I'm going to use that tip. First of all, thank you. I see how that can absolutely just put your brain in a completely different spot.
Yep.
And so, yay, love that.
It was one of those tips that I thought, when I heard it, I was like, that can't possibly work. Like I, turn my nose up and say like, absolutely not. And then I tried it and I was like, gosh darn it, I hate this. But I'm also in love because I wrote more this session than I had before. And you know what? Data doesn't lie. So let's just keep going with it.
Absolutely. I mean, and this could be something you could really have fun with, right? Like you could have a font, change the font each week, or have a
Yeah.
font like this is my Tuesday font, or this is my,
Yeah.
really could just really have a lot of fun if that was something that was helpful to you. All the writers
Hmm.
out there, please do try this, report back, because I'm going to, and I will report back because I love it to the moon. And I also thank you for the, just get it out there, just get it on paper, right? You hear all the time about the crummy first draft that,
Hmm.
we just got to get it there so then it can get good.
Yep.
And I think there's so much pressure for, to do that. Oh my gosh, I misspelled that. Well, okay, whatever. It's not like you're going to let it stay misspelled, let's just go. Yeah.
Yeah. But then, of course, like, then the second factor is like the systemic problem or like the structural problem. So, like, I'm usually very quick to talk about my privilege, because I think that any creative professional who doesn't is like selling you a bill of goods. So I'm very quick to say, like, first off, I have a lucrative career. I have the financial means to be able to prioritize this part of my life. My husband also has a, lucrative career. And so when we think, and we don't have any children, that's a huge, a burden for a lot of people, especially if they're actively raising children, the young children. There are going to be, or, perhaps caretaking older relatives. There are a lot of things that are going to be hurdles that are going to, sort of take up a lot of your time. And that's okay, right? I have a lot of friends who are young moms, and they have to kind of come to this radical acceptance that, it's going to take them a little longer, it's going to look a little more frazzled, and that's okay, because like that's the stage of life that they're in. And so for ways to overcome some of those issues that people might be struggling with, it's going to take a village, right? I think when we think about especially people in some kind of domestic partnership, like, can you talk to your partner in a way that allows you to prioritize that time, right? Can they take the kids one day a week so you can have a day to yourself to go to a cafe, get out of your house, and make this time for yourself? How can we reclaim some of that time? I think especially as women that are conditioned to put everybody else first and say that our desires and our passions are silly and frivolous, and like not important, especially if they're not monetized yet, right? You can easily, capitalism and patriarchy will come down and say what you want is not important, and so you should just not even try. And I say absolutely not. Writing is a mental health escape for me. I am so much more calm and happy, and less anxious, and just more content with life when I put this on the top of my priority list. And so it benefits everybody in my life that I do this for myself. And so if anyone's struggling with, putting up some boundaries and locking the door and things like that, like, I give you permission, because it's not going to happen if you don't, one, if you don't take it seriously yourself, but also if you don't reiterate and reiterate to the people in your life that this matters to you. Because something will always come up. There'll always be a chore to do or an errand to run. And, if you start treating this you know, like the world is going to end if it doesn't happen, like, everyone will start making space for you, or you'll reclaim that space for yourself. And so anyone who isn't going to be supportive on that journey is someone that you might want to reevaluate how you interact with them, and think about who in your village can help you really do this for yourself.
No, I love that. I love that. And also with that, how we can support other people in our village, because I think that if we create this culture within our little zones of life, that these things are important, and how can I support you, how can you support me, let's make this a little bit a normal part of life. It's like, oh gosh, let's talk about what are the things that you do for you, again,
Hmm.
before they're monetized, right? And obviously if they end up being monetized, great.
Yep.
But if not, I really appreciate the fact that you shared that you're just a better Alyssa when you're able to do this. And I know a lot of us feel that way. So yeah, let's just
Yeah.
help each other.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you do have a bit of discretionary income, or you can kind of move some stuff around in your budget, when I started hiring a house cleaner, for example, like, looking back on it, I was like, goodness, I probably should have put her in the acknowledgments. Because the fact that I'm not cleaning my own house is a huge, like, weight lifted off my shoulders, and that's more time that I can spend writing. I also get all of my groceries delivered. And so another thing that I don't have to do, I probably use DoorDash a little bit too much. And so because my priority and what I value is my time, and if I can buy back some of that time, again, that's a huge and massive privilege. And it's okay if, that's not a possibility for you or anyone else who's listening. But if you can, don't try to talk yourself out of it and say, oh, I can do it myself. Like, oh, that's silly. Like, no, like this is, for me, it's like life and death. And I need to make sure that I treat it accordingly. So, obviously it's helped a lot with my marriage too, because now we're not resenting each other or doing some kind of tally of, who's doing more chores or things like that. And so he can go do his thing, I can go do my thing. And then, we have the ability to just be more comfortable around each other and more open about each other's passions when all of the other stuff is taken care of.
Oh yeah, that is so, so good. So being a productive writer, we talked about sort of getting things going. What are some of the other tips that you have? Maybe it has to do with the writing process itself, or how to structure something, or the editing, or when do you know it's done? Sort of.
Yeah.
I know we could talk for days and days about this, but what are
Yeah.
some of the things that are sort of maybe top of mind for you?
Yeah, it's so funny. I've drafted 4 novels, and I'm in the process of publishing them, and obviously my first is coming out, tomorrow. But it took me a couple books to realize what routine really worked for me, and writers talk a lot about whether they're a plotter, which means they like plot in advance, they do a lot of outlining, or they're a pantser, they fly by the seat of their pants and they just kind of wing it. And I'm definitely the former. I think that I don't really like the editing stage, and so I would rather take longer planning and drafting and doing a relatively clean first draft, not writing myself into a lot of plot holes. So I have less to fix later down the line. And so I usually spend a couple weeks really nailing down the theme of the story I'm trying to tell. What is the point of it all? Because you have to really know that about yourself. Like, what is the point that I'm trying to get across? Not necessarily the moral of the story, but in romance, love always wins in the end. But like, why? What obstacles are being overcome? What other things are being discussed in this novel? And then I do some work on characters. I understand the two lovers. I get their demographics and their personality and behaviors. Just enough of that, again, that scaffolding that I know kind of who they are as people. And maybe I have some celebrity inspiration that kind of can help sort of inform that. And then I'll usually also do that work for maybe like an antagonist or some other secondary character that might play a bigger role. And then when I finally have the theme and the characters, then I do some plotting. And there's a variety of resources out there that can help with this. There's the Save the Cat method was applied from screenwriting. For romance writers specifically, there's Romancing the Beat. And so they lay out what, common plot structures look like and what are those beats that you need to hit so readers feel satisfied that, you told a complete story from start to finish and all the loose ends are wrapped up. So I do a little bit of that. And after that, then I feel pretty good that I can start with the actual drafting. And that can take anywhere from, 3 to 6 months for me now that I've kind of gotten to a rhythm and I know, I know how to do this. And then I usually hand it over to critique partners, beta readers. I get a lot of feedback. I usually sit it on a month while I wait for people to read. I go do something else. I work on a different project. I come back, I edit it. And that may take a few months. It depends, on the state of the feedback. And then once I'm feeling really good about it myself, that's when I send it to my copy editor who does the line edits and makes sure everything runs smoothly. And at that point, then it's just a lot of like fine tuning, proofreading, tweaking. And so I would say to anyone who's listening, you know, get into a established rhythm on what works for you at each stage of the game, right? What do you like to do? What do you not like to do? And how can you sort of optimize the writing process to play to your strengths? Because some people can write really fast, and so in that case, maybe they're a pantser and they fly through that first one in like a month, but they spend more time editing. Like that would be sort of the opposite sort of writer that I am. But if it works, right? And don't question whether it works. Just run with it. Because the more established you can get in your routine, the more predictable it becomes. And the reason why that's important is because your brain is telling you you can do this. You've done this before. And that is super, super important, that you can trust yourself to get something like this done, because it is a long, arduous journey, and you sometimes need to do that a few times before you realize, okay, now I'm getting somewhere. Now I know what I'm doing and where I'm going.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, the trust in yourself, because the confidence is, the mindset, right? And it's, I know we talk about that in so many areas of life, but trusting that you can do it, right? Like you said, you've done it before, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
All of these things are things that I believe, we have to tell ourselves fairly regularly. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, and I always say, I've been writing my whole life, right? I From a very early age. I majored in English as an undergrad. I went to Fresno State. I'm a journalism. I have a master's in journalism, and I am a marketer. I'm a content marketer, and so I've done writing content for tech companies for over a decade. But what I'll say is all of that is not fiction, right? Like, it is very important for me to remind myself, like, I'm still new at this kind of writing. And it's okay for me I'm going to need practice doing that. And so just because you may be super great at one particular facet of what you do doesn't necessarily mean that's going to translate fully to something else. So I would always say, like, I can write novels now, but I've never written a screenplay, or like I couldn't come up with a haiku, or I can't write a song. Like those are all I could, but those are things I'd have to train myself in, because each one of those mediums is different. And some people are better at things than others, and so figure out what kind of art do you like to make and why, and then figure out how can I train myself to improve, and how can I bring other people who may be farther along than me in this journey, to help me improve my craft and get better over time.
I love that. So, as we wrap up today, let us know where folks can find your novel, and maybe just a little bit about the what it's all about.
Yeah, yeah. So Love Actually is a Silicon Valley rom-com. It's the first installment of a really fun series set in the Bay Area. It stars a celebrity stylist who is kind of going through it. Her biggest client dumps her right before Fashion Week, and she's got to kind of make money fast. And so she gets a gig working at a tech company to make over a CEO who is not the most fashion conscious, and this woman Casey learns belatedly he actually never agreed to hire her in the first place, and he does not want her help. So got a little bit of enemies to lovers, a lot of sexual tension, and it's fun hijinks. A lot of satire about tech and Silicon Valley. So if you're interested in that, you can find Love Actually on Amazon and other online retailers. It'll be out officially tomorrow, and I'm super, super excited, to bring this to the world, because I had a blast writing it. And so I really hope that readers have just as much fun reading it.
Oh, I love it. And I was blessed to get an advance copy, and I loved it. So I just thought it was just a ton of fun. Alyssa does some creative things with the writing, and just a blast. So if you love romance novels, listeners, please, please, please check it out. Yeah, and so because writing is a very big part, obviously, of your life, Alyssa. But however, it is not all that you do.
Mhm.
We're going to have you back next time to talk about the world of freelance work and how to be productive there. So stay tuned, everyone. And thanks so much for joining us on this episode of
Thank you for having me. I love having these conversations, and Betsy, you are so great at what you do. So there's going to be so many tips from all these experts. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. And we'll see everyone next week on Handled Ish.